Let me tell you a bit about the nature of the presentation. It's about 10 slides only. And this is a result of about 60 sources that we have used to pre-produce either secondary or primary, but also about 80 conversations with our partners and clients, as these times don't necessarily allow to do only data, but also insights and foresights are valued. So this is sort of a cumulative summary of what we have learned from data and insights across the markets. First, our team prepared some overview of impact of COVID-19 in the three areas of demand. Overall, the pandemic caused that we have and will have less students in next semester. However, we all expect more students in and after recession that should be afterward happening after the pandemic and mobility is resumed. For 2020, over 80 to 90% universities plan on-site or hybrid lessons. Less international students are expected to arrive, not necessarily because of lack of demand, but obstacles to arrive, flights, visa, test centers not open, etc. So they might come in smaller numbers or later. So more dependency on regional and domestic mobility is relevant in the next semester for PBSA operators. Last semester occupancy rates, well, there are various levels across the territories. Probably, and Luke can also give us some hints over here later on. But from what we hear and get reports from, Germany and European city hotspots were doing the best, reporting over 90% occupancies during pandemic or even now. Not necessarily that those rooms would be occupied, but students hold the rooms even though they are not staying there because the demand is quite high and they could lose the room. US, UK, Canada, most of the reports are about 50 to 70% occupancies. Because they have a lot of international students that they didn't return. Iberia and Australia had a little bit lower or zero occupancies as they had to close some of the premises over there. Next semester bookings, uptake seems pretty similar level. Some people report higher numbers than 2019. Some slightly smaller, no drastic changes. However, the bookings and uptakes are more volatile because of the no cancellation fee policy and no deposit policy. So we all expect some changes to happen to the booking uptakes as we progress towards the next semester. From operational and design point, the adjustments, there have been many adjustments to maintain occupancies, varying from in-building measures, so desinfections, one-way hallways, universities hiring additional private PBSA stock or hotels to de-densify the saturation of students. Then measures on sales, especially on book to commence time, to maintain the volatile bookings as much as possible, and also reaching to new audiences. So not only how students, but young pros or others. And some of the PBSAs need to require special permission in some territories. Future product preferences are towards end student studio for obvious reasons, and rental levels, price levels for rentals remain stable. So increases and decreases are neither reported nor expected. Capital markets transactions are delayed but not stopped. About 62% of stakeholders continue seeking opportunities. Pipeline projects continue as scheduled. So out of 175 due to open in 2020, about 80% are on time. Alternative refinancing like mezzanine is back on table more than previously. Discounts are relatively small, and we see more opportunistic investors. In general, investors and investment world remains confident about the PBSA and student housing. We don't see divestments as fundamentals remain strong. So the defensive counter-cyclical asset class nature is believed to play well during and after recession that is expected to come after pandemic. So out of the V, L, U, and W scenarios, U-shaped scenario seems to be most likely so far. If the pandemic will ease and relax sufficiently in summer, economic recession is expected next 12 months and students arriving in or during the fall. Some in September, some in October. It depends on the particular destination. But in case of U-shaped scenario, it is expected that the students will come to classes sooner than the economy will come back to normal. If we come to W-shaped scenario, so means that the signs of new cases will become more than just local challenges, and it rises up to second wave, and we will see new blanket restrictions, lockdowns. Then it is very likely that the confidence of universities to open and students to come will shake up, and the arrivals will be noticeable later on, probably in Q1 2021. When we look at the history, every single pandemic had a second wave, not like not. On the other hand, the governments will hopefully learn the lessons to address the local new cases rapidly, like we have seen in Beijing recently, that within 2 weeks they were able to go to 0 new cases in last 3 days. The governments will be able to manage the new cases very rapidly and promptly. Student housing obviously has a problem when there is pandemic, so mobility restrictions and social distancing. However, the long-term fundamentals stay strong and solid. Pandemic, by definition, is temporary and one day will be over. So we can expect an afterward recession. And in afterwards recession, in last 35 years, when we look at the key markets, key destinations, number of students was increasing, and the counter-cyclical nature of this asset class showed up. And even more so, when we look at the last 70 years, so this is Germany, and we see even stronger performance of this pattern across the economic downturns. So number of students is growing in such economic downturns times, if not even more rapidly, as you can see, and be it domestic or international students. And actually the strongest ever increase in number of students was noticed in 2009 after Great Recession. So just to summarize some of the trends to build further projections on. So we will see a temporary decrease in number of students, and the dependence will be more on domestic students. However, we have an unstoppable globalization, so more mobility, more flexibility, more renting. Actually, studying and renting is more on demand in and after economic recession, as we have learned from the previous cases. Student housing counter-cyclical asset class will most likely attract more investor demand and competition. Therefore, there is time for opportunistic investors, and we see more of them these weeks and months. And as a result, the student housing sector has become the third most popular asset class in Asia, as it was probably in the second half of the ranking. So moving forward to the next semester, we prepared an overview of top 8 European countries. So you can see UK, Spain, and Italy here. Next slide is Germany, France, Netherlands, and Poland. We aim for the biggest student housing markets. And we prepared a comparison by factors you can see on the left. So I will first make an overview and then analysis. First, we look at whether the students with valid visa are allowed to come back, and this is so across all the 8 destinations. Then we look at the intra-regional students and proportion of intra-regional students, which means those who don't need a flight to come to their study destination. In other words, how is the destination dependent on intra-regional versus inter-regional long-haul students that might need a flight, and if there is no flight or expensive flight, it may create an obstacle. And then we look at the number of international students that don't need visa to come to that particular destination. In other words, we look at the dependency of the destination on intra and inter-regional students. And as we can see over here, the winners over here out of these three is Spain. And then when we look at the same factors here, then Germany, Netherlands, and Poland have really high proportion of intra-regional students that are able to come, as well as big proportion of students that don't need visa. On the other hand, France, UK, and Italy are not performing as well. So as a result, we look at visa centers opening and flights availability. So as you can see over here, the best player in terms of how the visa centers and issues of new visa is in operation is basically UK. So up to 40% of visa centers are reopened and new visa applications are accepted online, which is quite a benefit, if not advantage. While most of the other destinations have visa centers closed or visa services suspended. As you can see, Spain, Italy, and Germany only 20%, France closed, Netherlands some openings, including non-EU countries, and Poland is doing quite well in these regards. Then we look at flights. So we made the research on the flight availability for the upcoming period and how many flights or what proportion of flights should be available up until end of summer. So UK plans to resume 70% of flights, Spain 75%. But when we look at Italy or France or Poland, it's only 40%. And when we put all this together, so what is the dependency on intra or inter-regional students, how many visa centers are open or flights available, then Germany is doing the best in this ranking, while France is probably at the end of the availability of international students to come or process their visa. At last, the most important factor, so academic year and what are the plans of universities. So when I start with the UK universities, 90% of universities plan face-to-face study in small groups, with lecture delivered online, either as a tutorial or a broadcast, so either as a hybrid or blended learning. And this pattern is basically visible across the other destinations pretty much. So some universities decided to do online only, but predominant majority of universities are still aiming to resume face-to-face with a hybrid or blended learning. The last factor, students allowed to return to PBSA. Well, this is allowed across with minimum restrictions so far. So how the next semester should look like, some factors. This is second to last slide. We are in between the U-shape and W-shape, local versus blanket restrictions, and nobody is in a position to say what will happen. Probably next 2-3 weeks will be decisive for next semester in determining the scenario over here. Provided that we will experience the U-shaped scenario, we definitely know from multiple researchers that we studied or did ourselves in China, in Brazil, in Russia, and so on, that students don't want to study online only. The onlineization has not affected this asset class as much as probably business travel and offices. So it didn't leave the permanent footprint. Students want to resume classes as soon as possible. So they don't defer, they don't delay their start. They would like to start as soon as possible, but they have to have the prospect of the on-site face-to-face learning within 6 months. That's basically usually the decisive factor. 80 to 90% universities want to resume face-to-face. However, hybrid and blended model is almost a must, not only for health and safety reasons, but many international students will arrive late or later. because of the obstacles with testing centers, visas, and flights. That's probably a given. And what we expect is that we will see more decisive university announcements in coming weeks. Actually, there is a direct correlation in between when probably Luke or colleagues from GSA or Coreste will confirm that once the university announces their decision to open or to do a hybrid or blended model, the number of bookings for PBSA is immediately increasing within days or weeks. So we expect the next 2-3 weeks to see more affirmative announcements of this nature. PBSAs, we expect that they will announce more health and safety measures and how they address COVID. We've seen special manuals of colleagues from Unite and how they address it and others. So we expect more of these to assure students that they will be safe, as well as more book to comments period sales improvements. So there are quite many bookings in the records, but how many of them will be able to be maintained is probably the new sales art that the sector will develop. PBSAs will focus on more domestic and regional students, as mentioned, but also look for alternative audiences, so to house not only students, but also young professionals, which will probably also have a longer footprint, and the asset class will experience co-living, even though it might not intend to do so originally. And PBSA, some of the PBSAs, including public stock, is not expected to open for cost reasons for next semester, which can actually increase the demand for private stock later on. How the 2021 might look like, either because we learn how to handle the situation, or there will be a vaccine. 2021 is expected that the mobility will fully resume. We will see relatively strong destination shifts. When we interviewed students, parents, and agencies around the world, we already see 5 to 10% shifts away from US to Canada to predominantly Germany seems to be a winner in this regards, but also to alternative destinations like Singapore, Prague, and others where they developed English provision. We will probably see same level or more students if the same pattern is followed, and then we will see more investment demand. So if in these times we already see more investors entering and investing in this asset class now, it is reasonable to expect that there will be more investment and capital available for this asset class in 2021. And this will be coupled with more availability and opportunities as student housing asset class needed to compete with other asset classes for land or stock. For retrofit, there will be less competition of this nature from office or from hotels. So the situation might be more fortunate in this regard. We anticipate that this will have an impact on pricing. The yields have not changed so far in most of the territories, and if they haven't in these times, then we expect that the yields compression later on will be there in 2021.